Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We all ready to jump right back into drones again? I hope so. Okay. Andy, we have the mic on? Okay, perfect. Sounds good. So good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk to you about the beginner drone flying stuff. We're going to go over quite a bit of information, but we're going to try to keep this fun and sort of exciting. My name is Dr. Brandon Stark. I'm the director of the UC Center of Excellence on Unmanned Aircraft System Safety. I am located at UC Merced. Here's UC Merced right here. There's our campus. It's like a little oasis in the middle of farmland. We spend a little bit too much money on watering the grass, but it looks nice. It looks nice. All new campus, right? We just were founded in 2005, so every single building is absolutely brand new, which is nice. So all the USB ports and power spots are everywhere. Okay, let's jump right into things. How many of you have seen Buzzy the drone mascot? This is the FAA's fun mascot for drones. His name is Buzzy the drone. In fact, the FAA has a whole web series of videos trying to teach you about drones and stuff with the animated cartoon of Buzzy the drone. So we're all here because we want to fly drones. But what are we really using our drones for? So primarily outside of videography and cinematography, the primary use of our drones has been for remote sensing in some degree. Now, sometimes it's remote sensing of construction sites, but I think many of us in today's group is more along environmental monitoring, agriculture, riparian or other wetlands, right? So we're following this idea of data collection with drones. So we're going to gear today's morning talk about how we get ourselves set up for this data collection. So quick background, right? We know that we take a lot of pictures. There's the types of aerial photography that we've got there. We have vertical, typical our nadir or off nadir pictures or our oblique pictures. But you notice, of course, that as we take our pictures, we don't truly have that nice grid pattern that we see in the center there. All of our pictures are going to be somewhat skewed, even to our best ability to take pictures straight down. And that's not because we're bad at picture taking. That's just the way that there's a difference between our pictures and photographs, or sorry, our maps and our photographs. See, when we try to look at something from a map perspective, our objects are always going to be in scale, right, and size accurate. We try to map that out. But when we take our pictures with our drones, and especially with our drones at our lower altitudes, we have to deal with the skew factor. All of the objects within our picture are not going to be accurate within scale, size, and location, right? Taking the same picture of those same two trees on different elevations, they come out looking very different. That's because it's a different viewing angle. That viewing angle becomes one of our big challenges that we have to overcome. And the way that we overcome it is with photogrammetry. Photogrammetry is a way of us taking our pictures from our drones and turning it into the orthorectified maps. And we'll talk about how we do this in more detail on Wednesday. We'll just go over how the fun stuff of what it does look like when we're all done. I think that's the best part. With our drone, we take a whole bunch of pictures. All of my pictures that I took in this data set are in those blue things. And you can see how they're all just kind of haphazard. This is a super old data set for my fixed wing operations. But the end result is we can glue those pictures to generate our three-dimensional terrain, drape those pictures onto that three-dimensional surface to end up with a very high resolution textured model. You can zoom in, see all those things. This is an area out in our vernal pool reserve called Three Willow Pond, because at one point it had 3 willows. There was at least 3 willows still alive when I took this data set. There are now down to 1 willow. but we're still keeping the 3 Willow Pond name. Here's another fun 3D model data set. This is, again, my vernal pool reserve. You can see all the cool 3-dimensional Mima mound features as we took this. This is a data set I took in 2015, super old now. But this is all taken with a drone, flying around 400 feet. Took about 400 pictures. Did a 3D reconstruction of the terrain, then draped the pictures onto the 3-dimensional surface so that we end up with this nice textured 3-dimensional model. We can use this for all sorts of stuff that we're going to talk about in more detail on Wednesday and Thursday, actually, for our research presentations. Hydrological studies, NDVI, all sorts of really fun stuff that we can do. How do we get to that point? Well, it all starts with our data collection. How do we get our data? We talked about this a little bit yesterday in our mission planning about how we're going to use our software to generate our flight paths, making sure that we get a decent amount of overlap. Now, typically you don't use this low level of side overlap, but I just want to show you so you can clearly see the difference between the side overlap as we do our transect this way and our forward overlap. See if this picture and that picture, 60% overlap. For most of our drone operations, we anticipate 60 to 80% overlap on both sides. You'll have an opportunity to play with that during our flight lessons today. You'll set up your polygons, you'll get your transects going, and you'll get the drone to do our autonomous flying. So our workflows. We're doing our cinematography. We're going to practice manual drone flying, and then we'd go into our video and photo editing software. But for our data collection stuff, we're going to focus in on autonomous flying and then moving over to photogrammetry. So our learning workflow for today, we're going to start you off with a little bit of drone safety. We're going to teach you how to fly the drones manually a little bit, and then move you over to learning how to fly drones autonomously. Then on Wednesday, we're going to go over how to process our data, the orthomosaics, and then finally finish up on Wednesday afternoon with the ArcGIS and the other data analytics. So we've got a whole lot to cover over the next 2 days. And I hope you're excited to get with us on our drone journey. There we go. Okay. So let's jump right into things. What is a drone? What is a drone? We've been showing off pictures of all sorts of drones. Now, the legal definitions, we have 2 definitions for us to think about. We have the unmanned aircraft, which is the fuselage and everything that's flying. It's the aircraft operated without the possibility of direct human intervention from within or on the aircraft. The unmanned aircraft system, Andy, you muting that? You got to turn the volume off. There we go. Okay. The unmanned aircraft system is the drone, the flying drone itself, and the controller, and what other pieces that go with it. The ground control stations, telemetry units, all those other parts to it. Now, of course, we're all very lazy with our terminology, so we just say drone. But if you're ever truly concerned, what we're exactly talking about, we can go into all the details. But what is the drone? Well, drones, we've been talking about the multi-rotor systems, but a drone is anything that is flying without the possibility of a human on or on, inside or on top of it controlling it. So everything from our model aircraft to our toy helicopters to even the very first labeled drone, Target Drone Denny 1, which was a target practice aircraft. These are all falling into the category of drone. You see all sorts of other fun stuff. I mentioned this one the other day. We got the our ski mask evil henchman drone operator, and here's the Lego Sky Police set, and there's our evil henchman There he is, our evil henchman drone operator. Now, does it matter if we're talking about toys or our fancy $3,000, no, $30,000 equipment? Kind of. This is a fun video. I'm gonna make sure that we don't blast this too loud. Yep. Oh no, now we don't get sound at all. Oh well. This is an old farmer's insurance commercial. Let me run that again there. There we go. Boom, right into the windshield. Now, is this a real life event? It is, actually. This made the news in about 2016 of a drone crashing through someone's windshield as they were driving down a road, leading to a car accident. So even though we might think of toys, drones and toys as, you know, maybe different categories, but they're not quite. So we really have to make sure that we think about safety, whether we're flying the big $30,000 pieces of equipment or even the smaller ones as well. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we get done today, and we're not going to spend too much time on it. I want everyone to make sure that they go earn your trust certificate. The trust certificate is from the FAA. This is the recreational UAS safety test. This is a requirement for flying all recreational drones, or if you're operating a drone without a Part 107 license. This will take around 10-15 minutes to do. I recommend if you can, we can do that, right now is a great time, especially before you begin your flight training this afternoon. It's not completely legally required for you to have this for flying this afternoon, but I strongly and highly recommend it. So the way you go there, let's go ahead and see if we can get onto the internet. Get onto the internet. Here we go. There we go. You'll go over to the recreational UAS safety test webpage. And there's a whole bunch of different test administrators that you could take your trust certificate with. Some good ones. So this is a homework assignment for all of my students as well. Whenever we start drone stuff. A lot of my students like Drone U. Vanessa, which one did you pick? Embry-Riddle? Okay, was that good? Okay. Embry-Riddle Pilot Institute. The AMA, I mean, it's all the same material, but I think the AMA's website, every time that I've tried it, has always been a little slow on me. I'm gonna go ahead and just click through Drone U here. Welcome to the recreational UAS safety test. Who should? Everybody. Everybody. You go click here to take the free test. We're going to go ahead. You can sign in. Let's see. That's if you already have one. Okay. I'm just going to walk you through. I'm not going to go through the entirety of the test. Register. Click to start the test. And of course, it's all free. You can see they're just asking a couple of questions here. We're going to go over, it goes over 4 things: requirements, preparation, safety, and limitations. Just by going through this training, you're going to learn quite a lot about the drone stuff if you've never touched a drone before. If, of course, you've studied for your 107 and you already know a lot of drone stuff, this will be a piece of cake. Just a formality as you click through all of our stuff here. Let's go ahead, start off with the requirements. See how fancy they make this? You'll read through some of these slides here. And I think this, statement right here, because drones can be very simple to fly, it is easy to think that there is not much risk in flying one. But the reality is, drones have collided with other aircraft, injured people, and caused property damage. Now, I don't care too much about the property damage one, but the injuring of people is one that we should really make sure that we understand. That is why safety is, of course, important for everybody. And by taking this one, you meet the requirement of Title 49 USC 44809A7. All this drone lawyery stuff. So these are the rules for recreational flyers, only flying for recreational purposes. And you can see the rest of those as well. Now, this recreational stuff also applies for those in academia at institutes of higher education. Your flight operations may not require a Part 107 license if you can meet all of these recreational requirements. For the purposes of the drone laws, academic activities at institutes of higher education may count as recreational activities. And it applies not just to the students, but also to postdocs and staff as well. So it's not limited on who it is, but the activity. So for all of you research staffers, say at UCANR or the RECs, you may not need a Part 107 license if you're doing academic work. Okay. So let's lost. Oh no, I lost it. Yes, faculty as well. Isn't that crazy? Pretty big loophole. Now, that loophole does not exist for high school. High school instructors, however, still need Part 107 license if you're doing high school, anything more than helping students learn how to fly a drone. So if you're doing a high school research project or high school activity, you would need a Part 107 license. They only made that exception loophole for institutes of higher education and JROTC programs. You can click through and learn airspace. Unless specifically authorized by the FAA, recreational drone flying is limited to no more than 400 feet above ground level. We introduced the concept right here. Is limited to the UAS facility map altitudes in controlled airspace. Now, for some reason, they don't tell you about that yet. I'll go ahead and share with you. Around airports that have controlled airspace, and these are big airports, there is a whole series of restrictions on how high you could fly. So in the United States, let's zoom in where we are. Many of you flew in to the Monterey airport. And all around the Monterey Airport, you see these numbers in red. In each of these grids, that is the tolerable, acceptable flight altitude in those grids. Notice there's a lot of zeros. Yeah, the Monterey Airport does not like people flying drones in Monterey or nearby. But you go a little bit further out and we're okay. So where are we? There we go, CSU, Monterey Bay, Garrison Road. So we're about right here. So we're about right here. The acceptable allowable limit within our area right here is 400 feet. That's about normal. Now, if you need to fly above that limit, say if you want to fly in any of those zero grids, you would need a Part 107 license. If you can handle flying only below these numbers, then you can tolerate having only the recreational license, the recreational certificate. But if you do need to fly above, you need to have your Part 107 license. To where? Left. Pebble Beach. Okay. There you go. You can see this big swath of 0 feet. Other airports are a little bit more accommodating, but that's pretty common. Yes. If you're operating without the Part 107 license, oh, sorry. The question was, what about flying near tall buildings or structures? And I'm assuming you mean within the controlled airspace, within the controlled airspace. So within the controlled airspace, there is no difference in terms of the altitude restriction. The altitude restriction remains supreme, the overarching requirement. So even though there might be a tower that is 200 feet tall, if the grid that you're in says only 0 feet, then you're only allowed to fly 0 feet. Now, the airports are supposed to take into account those buildings when they draw these maps. So the airports are the ones who says, this grid is 200, that grid is 0 feet. Watsonville has an airport, but it does not have controlled airspace. The airport is too small. It does not matter there. Yep. Yes.
At the Monterey Airport, there's that box.
Yes. Oh. Oh, this dotted red? Okay. So what does this dotted red region mean? Well, let's pull open my layered list because I think I know what it means. This computer is so slow, so slow. There we go. It's a Class E surface extension to that airspace. It does not make a difference to our drone flight operations, but it is technically a Class E airspace. Mm-hmm.
Military airspaces separated, or they also included?
Military airspaces and military areas are included on this map. In fact, you'll see right here in this bright red It should tell you the no-fly zone. That is the naval, one of the naval bases. If we were to scroll down to say, all these red areas are basically no-go zones, right? Lompoc. Here we go. This is the one that gets my UC people in the most amount of trouble. Our Naval Weapons Station Seal Beach area. Okay, so how are we going through the trust certificate? Done? Got pretty far in it? Haven't started? In progress, okay. So we'll go ahead and keep moving forward a little bit. You can work on that as you go. But does anyone want to share with us anything that they found interesting or new that they may not have learned or heard about yet? No, not yet. Vanessa, when you went through it, what did you find interesting or something that was new for you? The no-fly zones for the military bases, just how extensive they are and where they might be. I mean, you would imagine that you don't want to fly into military airspaces, but at least they put that on a map for us to make sure that we don't go in there. Andy, have you taken the trust? Not yet? Okay. Oh, you've got your 107. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not quite. So the trust certificate is only for the US and it's just for the recreational. The Part 107, there are no formal acceptance processes for it yet. There are some countries, and it's on a country by country basis, whether or not they accept the Part 107. But anyone can take the Part 107 if you're within the United States and you meet the other requirements, such as you have a passport or other proof of identification, and whether or not you understand English well enough to take the exam. So if, our foreign students and foreign nationals can get a US Part 107 license. Whether or not that transfers back to your home country is going to be on a country by country basis. Mm-hmm. No, they've actually changed those rules. Oh, sorry. I know, I'm so excited to answer questions, right? So the question was, can we fly a drone at night? Can we fly a drone at night? They've actually changed those rules. And I think the trust certificate mentions that you can fly a drone at night recreationally, as long as you can follow the recreational rules. And the same thing for the Part 107 drone license. They changed that rule recently as well. You can fly a drone at night as long as you can maintain visual line of sight of the drone and you install a very bright anti-collision beacon light on your drone. Now, whether or not you're going to be able to maintain visual line of sight at night is a much more challenging question and much more challenging to maintain visual line of sight operations at night. You still must be able to determine the orientation, location, and altitude of your drone as you're flying it at night. So you can imagine that if you can't see your drone very well in detail enough to tell which way it's pointing in, then you're outside of visual line of sight. So in practice, you can fly your drone at night, but your limited range is probably on the order of 50 to 100 feet. Mm-hmm. It needs to be a flashing beacon of light that can be seen all around the aircraft. Yes. How do I get to the facility map? Absolutely. Actually, could we table that one? We have a whole other section on that one, but I'll make sure that we cover it. Sorry, the question was, can we do the facility map? Sorry. Do you need to display proof? So the question was, do you need to display proof of your academic status in order to fly without a drone license? Not necessarily the academic status, but you do need to show the trust certificate. You must make sure that you have your trust certificate on you, and the police can ask you that to display your trust certificate if they ask you about it. Whether or not the police know the difference between a recreational and an academic flight is an entirely different question. Yeah, that's a little bit more challenging, but you don't need to prove yourself to the local police. The FAA may ask you, and then you just show your academic credentials.
A point of clarification on the to airspace in Monterey. Mark Taylor shares it goes down to ground level and you need to request access to the airport 3 or more days before you go.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mark, but you're actually incorrect there. The E2 extension does not require LAANC approval. And you could tell that you do not require approval. We go back to our facility map and to that location. You notice it does not have only in the squared regions do you need to get FAA authorization. And only when you're in the controlled airspace. So this dotted E2 region, you do not need to get FAA authorization. Okay. So moving on. So let's talk a little bit more about safety. How are we doing on time? Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about safety. So safety is only as strong as the links that is comprised to. So remember, safety is not just, is the drone safe? Safety is, are you the pilot safe? Are you operating in a safe location? And is the drone ready to go? Because anytime that we break one of these links or have a weak link, that entire safety chain will fall apart. And so we have to think about a number of different things as we go through safety. So the big 4 for our safety is going to be the drone, the airspace, the location, and the weather. These are going to be the 4 major things that you'll want to check before you begin any drone flying. And it makes sense, right? If we're talking about our drone safety, we should make sure that our drone is in tip-top shape anytime that we begin flying, because no problem on the ground ever gets better once it's starting to fly in the sky. Everything just gets worse the higher up you go. So always make sure as you take a look at your drone that you should always do a thorough inspection of your drone before you leave your lab, before you leave your space. I always tell my students, to double check whether or not the system turns on, check all the firmware updates, even before we leave the office. Do all of that stuff in the air conditioning and not in the field. Test everything before you leave the office. Especially those pesky firmware updates, because they always hit you at the wrong time. One thing to keep in mind with our DJI drones is that the newer DJI drones, all of their batteries also have firmware, and you need to update the firmware on all of your batteries before you head out to the field. So just put one battery in, update the firmware, swap out batteries to the next one, pop it in, turn everything on, update the firmware, repeat that a couple million times. It is anything on the Phantom 3s and above. Yes. So we actually had to do that for the Mavic Minis not too long ago. Update all of those darn battery firmwares. Now, it doesn't take too much time, but if you have to do that out in the field and you're on a time crunch, it could be a little bit problematic. So what you check as you're checking your drone, you got to check your props, inspect your props, look for chips on the props. Always go ahead and replace your props. Anytime you think that it's not perfect, go ahead and replace them. They're so cheap. Just keep replacing your props. No point in trying to stretch it if you don't have to. Motors, spin your motors. If they can spin, great. If they can't spin, well, then you've got a problem, right? Check your arms and fuselage of your drone. Look for cracks, scratches, anything that might compromise its integrity. Joints, batteries. We'll talk more about batteries. Batteries is a big topic. Your camera lens, make sure those are looking good. Landing gear, if you have them, and collision sensors as well. I was working with a group over at UC Merced. They just bought a whole bunch of new Phantom 4s, and they wanted to go test fly. And as I was helping them, I was doing my inspections, and I realized that they had not removed the clear plastic film on all of their collision avoidance sensors. None of their sensors would have worked, and who knows what might have happened because they would not be able to see through those clear plastic films, those protective ones that they have for packing. So you'll get a chance to play around with drones, and you'll walk through a drone inspection when you go out to fly this afternoon. The next thing that you want to check is going to be your airspace, whether or not you could actually even fly at that location. Maybe that should be actually first. That's up to you. We'll want to use our airspace maps and our airspace aviation charts. You'll want to check for knowing where you're flying in terms of the airspace. Look for nearby airports, smaller ones and helipads especially. And we'll talk about this and think about this throughout the week. Air traffic patterns. You might even deal with some special use airspace as well. Hospitals don't have airspace. Yes and no. Yes and no. So hospitals do not control their airspace. They do show up on before you fly, and they will ask you to call up the helipad so that you make sure you don't interfere with the traffic patterns, but they don't actually control airspace. That's not an airspace issue, that's an air traffic pattern issue. Now, where do you find this information? Really, really important check. So there's lots of ways that we can find our information. You can Google up UAS facility maps and you'll end up at this webpage. This will tell you a lot of the official FAA information, but it will tell you the airspace class and the airports, but it won't tell you things such as the helipads and the other little issues that you might run across to. So we have a couple of other favorites. Air map is a good one. I want to log in. I can go through all of this. Yeah. Okay, here we go. So Air Map also gives us a nice visual view. And luckily enough for Air Map, they do tell us additional information. We'll mark out in red, in addition to some of our national parks that you should not be flying in. National parks do have the authority to kick you off of their property if you're flying a drone inside those national parks or national forest, not all national forests, some national forests. It depends on who's the managing agency. They'll also tell you other things are military special use airspaces, all the air classes, all of the grids if you zoom in. And of course, they'll also let you know about some other things. It looks like we've got an emergency first responder action there. So no flying in there, try to avoid that one. That's another emergency first response. If I go over up here, We can change some of the things that we're looking for. Turn off our first responses. And we've got other items that we can identify as well. So AirMap is a really good resource. There's also, of course, the FAA's Before You Fly web app as well. That will also tell you about helipads, and they'll also tell you the phone numbers to call if you need to call an airport. Now, you typically don't need to call an airport now. You had to 5 years ago, but in 2018, they changed the rules. You no longer would typically have to call an airport, except in certain use cases where you're operating in controlled airspace in coordination with that airport. So what makes an unsafe airspace? Here is a fun video. Well, I guess, of course, depends on your definition of fun. Right. Flying, beautiful Miami Beach coastline. I would estimate they're at what, 350, maybe 400 feet altitude. Now, whether or not it's safe to fly at this beach is an entirely different question, because there's all those people on the ground. But you know, he might be over the ocean and he's not directly flying over anybody. If the drone goes down, oof. Yeah. How many of you spotted that one as it was just a dot on the horizon? There we go. That's an unsafe. Coastal helicopters, and Eric Delusion, who you'll meet outside, he's teaching people. He'll tell you all about the fun times he has at flying along the coastline in San Diego and all the low flying helicopters that he has to deal with, because they come in low and they come in fast. It is your responsibility as a drone pilot to make sure that you're not caught unaware, that you get out of its way well before it's on top of you. This pilot got lucky. Both people here got lucky, honestly.
You think the helicopter pilot even saw it?
Probably even not. Probably not. I doubt the helicopter pilot even saw this drone. Right? This guy's flying 60, 80 miles an hour. Maybe. I don't know. Imagine you driving down the highway. Are you going to spot a drone off the side of the road? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But so you'll find, and look at what he's doing here. He's looking through the viewfinder. And when you get a chance to fly outside, you'll tell. See, it might even be possible to see this helicopter right here, this little dot right here, as we're watching the video on a big screen and projector. But most of the time, you're going to be operating your drones with a little tiny camera on your phone. That dot is going to be a tiny pixel. You're not going to catch it. You're not going to catch it. So probably about right there. And you can tell when he notices. Okay, woof, right? See that lag, see that delay? Yeah, it takes a good 2 seconds before he's responding to it. Crazy, right? So how do we make sure that we stay out of their way? We'll talk about that one later this morning. Yes. 2 minutes? No, I'm going to go over. So location matters a lot. But you know, most of these issues are pretty obvious, right? Here's a Lego version of the Whomping Willow from Harry Potter, right? Trees are the #1 eaters of drones in the UC system. We lose more drones to trees than anything else. But that said, I don't care when we crash into trees. See, the most important thing for safety is not whether or not we lose the drone. The most important thing about safety is that we don't hurt anyone. Your priority when you do your safety assessments is to make sure that you do not hurt anyone with your drone. If you have an option between crashing your drone into a person or into a tree, you go for the tree. So even though trees eat a lot of our drones, I will tell people to fly over trees because if the drone crashes, it's going into the tree and not a person. So as expensive as your drone might be, an injury can be a lot more expensive. Your safety planning should be people-centric, not drone-centric. So how do we do that? We make sure that we do the basic things. Safety buffers are probably the easiest way that we could do. We tell ourselves or tell our drone software, these are the areas that you should fly in. And we make sure that we design our flight areas such that if there are non-participants in our area, that they are some distance away from where we are going to be flying. So if I was flying in this tiny quad on campus, I would restrict myself only to the middle of that area, making sure that there's a nice buffer in between. Now, a general rule of thumb I like to do is my safety buffer should be at least 1/4 of my flight altitude. So if I'm flying at 400 feet, I'm maintaining a safety buffer of 100 feet between my drone and any pedestrian walkway or roadway. Now, that's pretty conservative, right? It's kind of big, but that works for a general rule of thumb. It may even be higher if I'm planning on flying on a windy day. Now, speaking of wind can get a little challenging. Most of our drones tend to be pretty good about wind. Wind tolerance around 10 to 15 miles an hour. Those are going to be kind of the days where I'm going to be a little iffy about flying a drone. Gusty wind, because gusty wind may exceed 20, 25, 30. It can get super high. So whenever I see we've got 10-mile-an-hour winds, I'm anticipating that we might have gusts up to 20 miles that we should be concerned about. Now, our drones might be able to tolerate that, but see, our wind will always be faster above than we are at the ground. If we are taking the wind measurements at the ground, I think it's going to be, I wouldn't say twice as fast at 400 feet, but it very well could be a lot faster at 400 feet. So whatever the wind level on the ground is, it's going to be worse up in the sky. So if your drone is telling you it's too windy and you're only at 20 feet off the ground, it's definitely too windy to be 200 feet off the ground. Now, many of our drones, especially the DJI or the more intelligent ones, will give a too windy alerts to tell you that it's struggling to maintain its position. Some other things to consider: extreme heat and extreme cold. I'm in the Central Valley. I deal with extreme heat a lot. All of our electronics overheat real easily, especially our iPads, right? So we got our electronics to consider, the drones on the tablets. The batteries overheating is a big issue. We'll talk about that one later this morning. And then just our own health. Sean mentioned this the other day, one of our former participants who had a heat emergency at one of our early drone camps. That's why we don't do our drone camps in Davis anymore. And why we're never going to hold a drone camp in Merced with this group, at least during the summer. You're all welcome to visit me in March. It's super nice. On the other hand, extreme cold will decrease your battery endurance, visibility. I mean, trying to see a white drone amongst white snow, you're going to lose that drone real quick. And then just, again, personal health as well. So we'll end this short morning session with a fun little thing. This is something I also do with my students. Do some Google searches on the worst drone accident or injury. What do you think you're going to come up with? Nothing good, right? How many of you know of a drone injury? Shane, you want to tell us a drone injury story?
Well, not a personal one, but
Mhm.
a colleague of mine went to launch and when he went to throw it off, it actually back fell at small.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yep. Wear a face shield. Okay. Anyone finding anything on the internet? Any drone accidents? Let's see. What do you think I'm gonna get if I just type in drone injury? Nothing good. Oh, drone injury lawyers. Let's see here. Stories and types of injury. Let's just hit up the news articles. Videos. Broken bones. What happens when a drone crashes into your face? Not going to be pleasant. So, how many of you think that a drone or knows that a drone has actually caused the death of a person? Yep. The latest one happened about 15 years ago. It was a Model RC helicopter, a fairly large one, although not as large as some of the ones that we saw today or saw yesterday. And it had a crash landing, bounced off the ground, and decapitated the pilot. Yeah. Keep in mind that some drones are quite dangerous. You should have some amount of healthy fear about keeping yourself safe from drones. Now, there's been some other real tough stories of kids being injured by drones when a drone flies into their face somehow. There's been some other incidences of people losing fingers to drones. Fairly high profile one, Enrique Iglesias, decided he was going to try to catch an Inspire 1 with his hand and cut off his hand. He didn't lose any fingers there, but he definitely cut himself up real bad trying to catch a drone. We have the footage of it. Yeah. Let's see. Not a smart idea. Not a smart idea. Don't do this. So, yeah. There you go. Real bad stuff happening. And then he keeps dancing, bleeding everywhere. You know, I didn't see. Yeah. So, don't try to catch a drone with your fingers. Yes. Mm-hmm. The trust certificate is for people 13 and up. So it's designed for 13-year-olds and up. I guess if they're a real precocious 10-year-old, you can go ahead and let them take the trust certificate, but they shouldn't be flying a drone by themselves unless it's got good, well, you've got good supervision, right? So you're supervising them as they fly their drones for the first time. Okay. Yes. Inside of a house. Can you fly indoors? Yes. So here's a fun little loophole. The FAA does not have any authority over flying drones inside of a building or structure. You are exempt from all FAA laws when you are flying a drone inside of a house or a building or indoors or whatnot, which means you could, there's no rule against it, flying a drone over your head indoors. Is it a smart idea? Probably not. But should you do it legally? Yeah, the FAA doesn't have any authority there. That also applies to, say, if you had a batting cage. So we have a kind of a batting cage set up at UC San Diego. Inside of that batting cage, even though it's outdoors, because it's fully enclosed, FAA drone laws do not apply. So they can do whatever drone laws, anything that they want to do without FAA authority. You can fly over people, you can fly multiple drones inside of a drone cage and whatnot, and all that. Now, should you? It's an entirely different story depending on how big the drone is and how much space you have. In a room like this, I might kind of be acceptable of flying one of the little minis because it's nice and small and I've got good control over it. But I will tell you, the most expensive drone accident that we've had in the UC system occurred at UC Irvine. And it was a graduate student flying a drone in his dorm room. And he broke a fire sprinkler. And do you guys know what happened when you break a fire sprinkler? The entire water for that entire building comes out that broken spigot. And there is no stop valve for it. It empties the entire tank. It flooded his unit and 3 units below him. It was a very expensive accident. Drone flying is not allowed in any dorms in the UC system. That is in every dorm policy. I'm sure it should be probably policy here. If you're in the dorms here, do not fly drones in your dorm. Don't fly it in your hotel room either. But you know, we do a lot of indoor work as well, but typically we use cages and lots of other protections to make sure that we're not breaking any fire sprinklers for a good reason. Okay, so I am going to somewhat pass it over to Sean and Andy. Sorry, Shane. I'm still half asleep here. And they're going to talk a little bit more about data. We're going to take a brief break over the safety stuff, talk a little bit about data management, and then we'll come right back into safety and preparing you guys for flight operations in the afternoon.